Trisha.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. You look so grown up. So, what grade are you in now?
I'm in eighth grade.
That is wild. How's eighth grade been going?
It's been going well. There's like a lot of work and tests like every week, but I'm keeping up.
So, I'm so glad that you did this and agreed to do this. I really appreciate that. We're going to basically try and talk about anything that you feel like you didn't get the opportunity to dive into more deeply or discuss while you were in school, not necessarily just with me, but just in school in general. So, what's the topic that you decided to talk about?
I wanted to talk about a little bit about like real world issues, stuff that's happening like on the news and everything, and how we didn't get to do a lot of that in like intermediate school or like even middle school a lot.
What real world issues are you referring to in particular?
There's stuff on the news about police brutality. There's stuff on the
Mm.
news about racism and um, abortion rights. And there's a lot of things about politics. And
Mhm.
I feel like if fifth graders and sixth graders were exposed to that more, they could be more like invested in the news when they grew up, even.
At what point did you come to that realization that these were important things to be aware of?
Well, I've been trying to get into watching the news more often with my parents, and I've been looking at interesting things happening, and I've been thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we could have a discussion like this at school? We can talk about it with our classmates, like see different points of view, and like we've done kind of like discussions or debates in school, not necessarily about like real world topics, but we have done discussions, and a lot of my classmates have really great things to say. So
Mhm.
it would be interesting if we could have a discussion about stuff that's happening in real time.
Now, you said discussions like this. What kind of discussions are you having that you're referring to?
Well, for example, in social studies, we were talking about the fall of Rome,
Mm.
and we were talking about different things that can make an empire fall. And my teacher, she gave us a list of different things that could make an empire fall, and she asked us to pinpoint like the three most important things that we thought contributed to the fall of Rome.
Okay.
And we were having a discussion on which were the most important. And it was a respectful discussion, and we were all saying, yes, I agree with that, but, and I thought it was really interesting.
We're able to dialogue about it without
Yeah.
it being controversial, correct?
Yes.
So, police brutality, abortion rights, politics, these are all really interesting, controversial topics. Why do you think that these topics are not given more attention or have not been discussed?
Well, I feel like, especially in middle school, kids learn about these topics, and since they're not discussed much in schools, they tend to take like the same opinion as their parents or the people that are around them.
Hmm.
And I think that while that should be allowed, it's also important to look at differing points of view and see how other people might see it, which is different from yours. And if we were exposed to more of that in like fifth and sixth grade, I think it would be easier for us before our opinions were already made.
A lot of opinions are formed by our home life, our families, our parents, our siblings, our friends. Just so similarly, just like we wouldn't want our parents to influence our beliefs, we also wouldn't want our friends to influence that either. We want to basically try and train ourselves to come up with our own opinion based on, reliable sources and relevant information, all of that, right? But taking a topic like police brutality or abortion rights or politics, why do you think that people might be hesitant to talk about that with young students, especially fifth and sixth graders?
Well, obviously, they are like touchy subjects and a little bit mature, and like they might not feel like fifth and sixth graders may understand it that well, especially because they're so young.
Do you
And
and you disagree with that?
yes, I do disagree because I feel like although there are some parts that might be too mature for them to understand, I do feel like they should be exposed to a little bit of that because that is the real world, and um, like fifth and sixth graders can be a part of the real world.
or how would you suggest bringing it up as somebody who was a fifth grader a lot more recently than I was? How would you suggest these topics be approached?
Like giving it an overview so they understand what it is and what it's about, but not all like the details about it. So it's like appropriate for their age level.
Are there any particular, conversations or dialogue that you've had, whether with your family or with friends, that you think would specifically be very beneficial for kids younger than yourself to participate in? And like, why do you think that would be beneficial, other than what you've already mentioned? Because you mentioned that, of course, learning other people's opinions, but you can learn that online, right? You can go on the internet, you can Google different people's thoughts and opinions. What is the value in really learning about it in school? What do you think is the value of really getting into the discussion of these issues in school with people in front of you?
Well, when you're online, it's very easy to listen to what a person is saying and just coming up with a counter argument, and then it doesn't really go much further from there.
Mm.
Whereas when you're talking to someone face to face, like a classmate or a family member, you can have like an actual discussion or a debate where like they can say something, you might disagree with it, you can give a counter argument, or you could add on to it and you could explore different points of view, or you could just like go deeper into the subject.
What was your experience, or what has been your experience? I'm guessing that there must have been a first time that you were given the opportunity to discuss and dissect a conversation that maybe was mature in content or in understanding. What was the benefit to you? What made you feel like this is good, this is useful for me?
It was gradual for me to participate in these kinds of discussions at home. But in school, the first time for me was in seventh grade, where we would do these mini moot courts in
Okay.
social studies,
Okay.
where we would have different people play as the prosecutors, the defense, and the judges. And we would kind of have like a court situation on like different topics. And I can't completely recall what the topics were about, but I do remember enjoying that kind of back and forth with discussing topics like that, because I never really had the chance to do much of that before. And I have been participating with more discussions with my parents at home, and I've been trying to watch the news more and try to participate in those discussions. And yeah, it's pretty interesting for me.
For parents, the idea, understandably, the idea or the thought of, fifth graders, sixth graders talking about some of these very heavy, very dark, though very real reality topics, issues, whatever you want to call it, of our, culture, society, our country, the world, really. Like, how would you kind of counter, I guess, their concern that, it's not the place of a school or a classroom to discuss these issues, but this is something for parents to discuss with kids? Principals, administrators, parents, I would say there's no way that these topics should be in the classroom because they're too sensitive, controversial, and maybe there's even a little bit of fear of what the kids would be exposed to. So how would you counter that, or kind of say, well, even though that might be true, it's still important to talk about?
Because like the school is a community and people should feel safe there, and although there might be some bias with the teachers and other students, there is always someone who has a differing opinion. Nobody in school has all of the same opinions, so there's always like some people that you can find to give another example, another opinion. And like it makes for a really good discussion and a really good community to like find different ideas and different points of view.
So we know what the positives are of talking about these issues in school. What's the downside? Let's say we don't ever talk about it. What do you think the problem is with that?
Well, I think the problem is that kids never will like find it hard to like really become invested in these topics when they grow older. If my parents didn't have me like try to watch the news a little bit or learn about these topics a little bit when I was in fifth and sixth grade, I don't know if I would be able to do more of that now and be able to participate in these discussions now.
Okay.
Because like sometimes there's news channels that give a different opinion than what I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to listen to those news channels too, because um,
Mm,
I want to be able to see all sides of
yes.
the situation before making my own argument. And I think if kids aren't exposed to that, like they won't be able to find their own opinion.
I think there's a really a high risk of being kind of boxed into a very narrow point of view if we don't expose ourselves to things that make us uncomfortable and expose ourselves, just like you're saying, to news channels, news reports that vary and that show different perspectives. Because in the world of social media, we also don't know what limited information or advertisements that we're being given or shown that are just going to show us kind of what we want to see. I don't know if you're on TikTok, but like it's kind of like the For You page, right? They cater it just to what you like. But that makes me wonder, like, what all else is there that I'm not being exposed to? Because only what I like is being reinforced. So then there's kind of that, if I didn't have other outlets and other means of information or outlets or platforms for information, then I would be very, very narrow-minded in what I knew or what I thought was out there, right? So I agree with that. So you're mentioning getting to know thoughts and discussing. So let's discuss, what are your thoughts, or what are some things that you'd like to get out there as far as the topic of, let's start with police brutality?
I do think that police brutality is, like, of course, negative because it kind of gives a bad rap to all of the other police officers because there's only like a small percent of them that are doing these things, and the rest of them are like bearing the consequences.
What about in terms of the victims and the people that the police is being brutal to?
I did a little bit of reading on police brutality, and the article I found was basically talking about it's racist because they're only doing it to people of color, and that's bad. But I couldn't find like anything more than that, really.
So when you say you didn't find a lot, what was it that you were looking for?
I was like trying to look for something other than what I see on the news, what I already know, because I know that police brutality and like the effects of it are negative. And I know what happened to George Floyd or Breonna Taylor is like negative and
Horrible.
it's not good.
Mhm.
It's terrible.
Mhm.
And but I was trying to find like an article or a video that said more.
More than that, like, what do you mean? What questions in your mind? I feel like you have some thoughts that you're have stirring up there. Like what?
Like, I was trying to find some, like, maybe something from the other point of view that says that police brutality is not that bad and it's only like some people that were killed. It shouldn't be that much of an issue that people are making it because there's some people who do say that. There was actually
Mm.
some kids in my class who were saying that the Black Lives Matter protests, like, they didn't understand why they were happening, that it wasn't really that much of a big deal.
What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I do think that the Black Lives Matter protests are like they do make sense and they should be happening. And I do think that they show a lot about our country because of protesters like being assaulted and everything. I think that says a lot about our country and like the way it's laid out.
Do you think, though, however, that sometimes issues are just black and white, and maybe we don't need to have another side, and sometimes wrong is just wrong and right is just right? Or do you think everything has two sides?
I don't think that every issue has two sides. I
Okay.
do know that, like, with everything that's considered right, there is some wrong in it, and everything that's considered wrong, there might be some right in it.
Mm,
But so far, I don't think there's any issue that's like just black and white because it wouldn't be an issue if it was black and white because what's considered
mm,
right is right and what's considered wrong is wrong.
mm.
So if like something was just considered right, that would just be like a universally accepted fact and
Right,
it wouldn't be an issue.
right. How do you think you decide what's right and what's wrong?
Well, for me, I try to look at the situation from both points and then I try to like make a judgment. And sometimes I try talking to other people. Like sometimes when I feel conflicted about something, I try talking to like members of my family or my friends. They might not necessarily have like a differing opinion, but I just try to talk to them about it and see what they think and if they can bring any new ideas.
Okay. You also mentioned politics. So what are some thoughts on politics, if any, that you'd like to share?
Well, I feel like a lot of issues, most of the issues in our world are about politics. They're they're about like getting ahead, they're about like staying in power,
Mm,
and I feel like even things that shouldn't be about politics, like
some
abortion,
about politics, yes.
are about politics. They're about getting ahead, and I definitely don't think that's right. Like they're making everything in life a race to see who wins, and I don't think that's right at all.
How do we prepare kids for that while not becoming that?
Like almost everyone is invested in politics, like they watch the news and everything. I know my parents watch the news and they have a stance, a political stance on a lot
Mhm,
of things, and I do on some things too. And
mhm.
I am aware that a lot of things are involved with politics that shouldn't be, while having a political stance on something. And I think the best way to approach that with kids is having them like look at a political issue and trying to analyze that while showing like the cons of politics and showing like the more negative aspects of it so they can understand what's going wrong with it, and maybe even in the future they can help solve that.
What are negative aspects of politics? Because what you're saying, having a political stance and having views and beliefs, I think that's the strong side of politics. I think that's fantastic. Learning how to debate, learning how to consider others' perspectives, having some empathy, being respectful in the way that you convey your beliefs, thoughts, having arguments, having evidence for those arguments, having counter arguments. I think that's all healthy dialogue. And I personally love that. But what are some downsides to politics, do you think? The parts that you feel maybe we need to avoid or unlearn?
Well, I feel like people should like, um, follow politics, people are kind of dividing themselves into
Mm.
like Democrats and Republicans, or like one side of an issue and another. And it's okay to like be friends with someone or have a family member who has a different view on something or belongs to a different political party than you. And people are just trying to separate themselves into two sides, which they consider right and wrong. And whoever's on the opposite side as them is like considered the bad side or the wrong side. And I don't think that's right. And I think people are trying to like push themselves, each person, into a box, which is right and wrong. And some people don't even fit into that box.
I can understand what you're saying for sure. But sometimes the issues that are being represented for some people more than others are very real, like life or death type issues. I think for that reason, I think it's become very much like, okay, well, if you belong to this party or that party, I have to separate myself from you. But because that genuinely affects me and my livelihood, and follow up for you is, where do you draw the line then? Because you also can't let everything go, right? So let's think about like World War II, right? We talked about that in fifth grade with the Holocaust. Isn't it because some people were of that mindset, like, oh, it's okay, that things kind of got as far as they got? So wouldn't it have been better for somebody to say, no, that's not okay, we're not accepting that, and we can't all just get along? So where do you think the line is there?
I do think there should be a line between like life and death situations and like just regular everyday issues
Okay.
and things that could like impact your whole life, and like whether you have a house or not, whether you have a job or not, like those kinds of things, there should definitely be a line there. But I also think that's another negative impact of politics, which
Mm,
is making you have to choose one side just because that's the only option for you. And
mm,
everyone else who's on the other side, you have to distance yourself from them because you have no choice, because that's the only option for you.
mm. And then the other topic you mentioned is abortion. So what topics or what thoughts come to mind when you think of that issue?
So I know that this issue is very split, but I am on the side with when I think that abortion should be legal and people should be able to have access to abortion.
Okay.
And my family is also on this side, and my dad was talking to me about this one man on YouTube who would give his stance on different political opinions, and he was on the side thinking that abortion is wrong,
Hmm.
abortion is murder,
Hmm.
and my dad, while he was not necessarily supporting this guy, he was trying to explain to me his mindset and why he would think the way he did. And we were
Okay.
having like a kind of debate, a discussion about that
Mhm.
as to why he would have that kind of mindset. And I was trying to give like counter arguments to why that mindset might be flawed or why it might like have a very negative impact on a lot of people.
And what is the benefit of this dialogue to you? Even talking with me about it or talking with your dad about it, what do you think that helps you to do moving forward?
Well, when I first learned about like the issue for abortion, which was like a couple years ago, like maybe 2 years ago, I was like, "Oh, people who think that abortion is wrong, like they're just crazy." And I know now that that's not it. Like they have thinking behind this, they have logic behind this, and I like listening to those points of views because it makes me understand why these people might be thinking the way they do. And there might be people in real life which I encounter which have very different opinions than I do. And I need to be able to accept them for their opinion and not like get mad at them necessarily, but try to understand why they're thinking that way. And if I think that they're wrong, or if I have a different opinion than them, I can try to explain them my side.
Okay. And what would you say to somebody, like a parent, adult, family member, teacher, administrator? Because I think a lot of this comes from what I can tell and from what I've known of you, that you yourself are a very confident person in what you know. And I think that and you're okay and you're comfortable with sharing your opinion and you're coming from a place where you're comfortable saying, you know what, I don't agree with that, or you know what, this is what I think, and let me tell you why. Not everybody, especially of your age, is at that place. Not everybody is that comfortable or standing firm in their beliefs, regardless of what the popular opinion may or may not be. And you also obviously have the support of your parents, and you have a certain dialogue and practice there, which is great. So, how would you advise those of your peers that maybe aren't that comfortable doing that, like, because maybe they would have fear, there would be fear there again, that, you know what, like if my daughter or my son is exposed to this other point of view, then maybe they'll be influenced because religion, culture, traditions, whatever it may be, or just personal preference might dictate that I don't want my child to be influenced by these other beliefs. So that's why keep it out of the classroom. We talk about it with my fam. We'll talk about it at home. So how would you address those adults?
Well, first of all, like for kids who don't feel like as confident with sharing their beliefs, I would say that it's okay to like not know a lot about something. I know there's a lot of things that I don't have a lot of information on, or I don't know a lot about, or
Mm-hmm.
don't have a lot of experience about.
Mm-hmm.
I am obviously like very young and I don't have a lot of experience on real world issues. I haven't been able to participate in a lot of things. And I know that it's okay to not know about that, but I can't necessarily say that some person is wrong or right about something until I've like completely educated myself
Hmm.
on that topic and I can say that I'm confident with taking a stance on that topic.
More exposure at a younger age, I feel like the more comfortable you become then as adults. Basically, the same kids that are unable to talk about politics or religion become the same adults that are unable to talk about politics and religion. So I do understand. I mean, I do believe that there is definitely value in talking about these things in a particular way to a certain degree with a certain, caution, obviously, or approach. At a young age, I do think it's really good to start that dialogue for sure. Have you engaged in conversation dialogue with your friends, with your peers that might be a little bit sensitive? And how, if so, how has that been received?
We have talked about politics a little bit in school, and as I told you, there were kids in my class who did have a differing point of view than me, and I felt that it wasn't because they had a different point of view that I'm saying this, but they felt very defensive about it.
Mm.
I would say something that they didn't agree with, and they would like kind of get mad at me in a way, or they would like get defensive about it and just like straight up say that I was wrong. And
Mm.
that's not the way to discuss with somebody.
Mm.
And if you don't feel comfortable with talking about something, you can't just like stay closed up forever, because if you keep waiting till you're comfortable, you're going to be waiting forever. And
Mm.
it's important to like talk about it at least a little bit and get a little bit of exposure to these topics until you feel comfortable with talking to other people about this.
How do you get people to be comfortable with being uncomfortable?
I was never exactly uncomfortable with sharing like my opinion on stuff. There was a time where I wouldn't say as much, and I still don't like say a lot. I don't like completely like shout out to everyone, this is my opinion, this
Yeah.
is what I think. And but I was never necessarily like uncomfortable with talking about it to other
Why do you
people.
think that is? Where do you think you got that comfort from or security from?
I've always been like kind of blunt about things, and I would always just talk to people about everything as long as it was appropriate, of course. And um especially when it came to like opinions that other people might disagree with, like if they asked me about it, I wouldn't like just agree with anybody. I would like say what I thought respectfully.
Do you think you got it maybe from your family?
Maybe like both my parents are like they've helped me with like this confidence a lot.
Okay, so that definitely makes a difference. Is that something you think could be built in schools?
It could be built because um, I feel like when you talk with adults, sometimes you may feel like you're judged for like being younger or not knowing as much. Whereas when you're with your peers, you may receive a little less judgment because they're all people like you and they know just as much as you. So I think it might be like easier to talk about it with your peers than with like adults. So it might be easier to talk about it in school.
How do you prevent people from changing their minds or, beliefs just based on what conversation might happen in school? Because I think if that fear could be acknowledged or alleviated for adults and parents, I think like a lot of this would not even have to be an issue. But I think that fear that my child is going to be influenced or they're going to be, converted or they're going to like change their political beliefs or they're going to basically that's going to be some form of a bad influence, whatever you want to define bad as, depending on who the person is. How do we reassure those that have that fear that it's okay to listen to another perspective and without it having to change your mind?
I don't know if this is necessarily reassuring, but I don't know if there's like a way to completely prevent it. But
Oh,
there may be a way to like educate your child enough about opinions that might be different from yours that you don't necessarily have to agree with outright. Like you could educate your child enough about both points. Maybe if you want them to lean more towards another point, you could tell them more about that. But I think it should be better to allow them to like create an opinion for themselves. And if you really think that that opinion is right, like they will create that opinion for themselves.
if you had to say three things that you think should be addressed or approached fifth grade, sixth grade, what would those three things be?
I think one of those three things should be racism,
Okay.
because I know we did talk a little bit about that in fifth and sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like we need to go a little more in depth with that because we read a lot of books about things happening about like segregation or maybe slavery,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to address like things happening right now because racism isn't over. That mindset is still there. And people of color are still like they still have that stigma around them, and like they're struggling to break free of that. And if younger kids were educated more about racism, um, they could help end that stigma.
Okay. So racism. And then the other two?
This is a very broad umbrella, but I feel like they should be educated about politics. Maybe not like one side or another, but like just politics in general and how to approach that, how to form an opinion, and how to like find reliable sources so you can form an opinion. And
And what about the third?
I feel like abortion would be like an important topic. Maybe not for fifth and sixth graders, maybe like middle schoolers who would understand that a lot more.
Okay.
But it is an important topic to talk about because it's happening a lot nowadays. Not that it's right or wrong, but like allowing someone to choose for themselves. Because one thing I've noticed with abortion is that there are people saying that abortion is right or abortion is wrong. And I understand both those completely, but why should it have to interfere with other people who want to have an abortion? Or,
So it almost sounds like the topic you're really talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, is about rights. So
yeah, yeah,
about who has rights and who doesn't, and who has a right to tell you what to do and not, or what not to do. Is that more of what you mean?
yes.
Okay.
Because the thing with abortion is that people are having opinions, but they're projecting those opinions on people that it really shouldn't affect. So
Okay.
that's what that's really about.
So rights and who gets a say in that, right?
Yeah.
So this will be one of the last questions on my end, of course, unless there's anything else you want to add. When it comes to things like racism, and hopefully you obviously know my stance based on when we talked about it in fifth grade, and we had a heavy emphasis on it. Do you think some people have, I've heard people say, by talking about it, are we just keeping it alive? Like by bringing up racism over and over and over, or talking about that it still exists and keep, pointing at it and highlighting it, are we just keeping that circle alive, or should we just not talk about it, keep it under, shove it under the rug and just like, let's not talk about
If you shove it under the rug and just not talk about it, you still have that idea in your head about racism. It doesn't just go away, it only grows because
it?
you don't have any other opinions. If um, That's why I think that if you're uncomfortable about a topic, you shouldn't just not talk about it because you still have that idea in your head and it's only going to grow. So if nobody talks about racism, that's not going to make it go away. It's still going to just be there and it's only going to grow. It's never going to change.
Okay. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. I appreciate your honesty.
Thank you for inviting me to this.
Of course. It was so much fun. I'm so glad I got to talk to you again. And I'm always here if you ever need anything. Just remember that.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Good luck with the rest of your eighth grade year. Okay.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.